They say the suburbs are peaceful. They say it's where you go to settle down, raise a 2.5 kid, get a golden retriever, and have polite arguments about property lines. They're liars. The suburbs are a low-stakes battlefield. The cul-de-sacs are the trenches, the weapons are passive-aggressive newsletters, and the landmines are architectural guidelines designed by people whose favorite color is, and I'm not kidding, Greg. I should know. I live here, Crestwood Commons. Sounds lovely, doesn't it? Sounds like a place where birds chirp and neighbors lend you sugar. And sure they do, but they also measure your grass with a ruler. My name is Mikey, and my Saturday morning ritual had just been shattered. The ritual is simple. I wake up, I let my dog, Buster, a 70-pound mutt who is smarter than most of the local school board, out into the backyard. I make coffee that could double as industrial solvent, and I sit on my front porch in a 10-year-old bathrobe and enjoy the morning quiet before the symphony of lawnmowers begins. That's when I saw it. The mail truck. Our mailman, Phil, is a nice guy, but he's an unwitting agent of chaos. He was just the delivery mechanism. The real threat was the organization he worked for. The Crestwood Commons Homeowners Association. I spotted the envelope from 50 feet away. You learn to recognize them. It wasn't white, like a normal, friendly bill. It was beige. A thick, heavy, almost arrogant beige cardstock, the kind of paper that costs $3 a sheet and is made from the pulp of endangered, joyless trees. In the top left corner, embossed in a font that screamed, "I have a gavel and I'm not afraid to use it," was the HOA logo. Ah, hell, I muttered. Buster, sitting at my feet, let out a low growl. He knew the beige envelope, too. He knew it meant I'd be pacing and swearing for the next hour. I retrieved the mail, my heart sinking. Nothing good ever, ever comes in beige. It's the color of bad news. It's the color of dentist waiting rooms. It's the color of... well, it's the color of our HOA. I ripped it open, which I'm sure was a violation of proper envelope etiquette. Official notice of violation. I scanned the page, my eyes jumping past the boilerplate legal threats. Dear resident of 427 Sycamore, a routine inspection of the Crestwood Commons community on October 28th has found your property to be in violation of the covenants, conditions, and restrictions, CC&Rs. Violation. Guideline 8.4, house numbers not sufficiently visible. Per the CC&Rs, all residents must maintain clearly visible address numbers from the street to ensure proper identification for emergency services and to maintain community aesthetic standards. I stopped reading. I looked up from the letter. My house numbers, a set of perfectly nice, 4-inch-tall, brushed brass numbers, were right there on the wall next to my front door. 427. They were, by any sane person's definition, visible. The letter continued. This notice serves as your first warning. Please remedy this violation within 14 days. Failure to comply will result in a fine of $50. And then, the pièce de résistance. Taped to the bottom was a grainy, zoomed-in, black-and-white photograph of my house, taken from a weird angle at what must have been 6 a.m. The numbers 427 were slightly shadowed by a single leaf from my decorative azalea shrub. A single leaf. They're gaslighting me, I said out loud. Buster, they're gaslighting me. Buster licked his chops, unimpressed. I walked down my driveway to the curb, coffee in hand. I stood where the mailman stands. I looked. 427. I squinted. I tilted my head. I closed one eye. Visible. Not visible. visible. Not talking to yourself, Mikey? I jumped. It was my neighbor, Dave. Dave is a good guy. He's the kind of guy who power washes his driveway twice a month and genuinely enjoys it. He's terrified of the HOA. Hey, Dave, I waved the beige letter. You get one? Dave sighed, the sigh of a man who has accepted his beige fate. He was rolling his trash can to the curb. Let me guess. Barbara? Barbara, the HOA president. A woman who, I'm convinced, subsists entirely on the tears of residents who used the wrong shade of white for their trim. You know it, I said. Got me for my house numbers. Apparently my 4-inch tall brass numbers are now employing stealth technology. Dave shook his head, looking both ways as if she might be hiding in his hedges. She's on a tear, man. She got me last week for unapproved wind chimes. Said they sounded too whimsical. Too whimsical? What does that even mean? It means they weren't beige, I said. Probably, he agreed. So what are you gonna do? Buy new ones? I looked at the letter. I looked at the single, offending leaf. I looked at Dave. A tiny, petty, beautiful idea began to form. Oh, I'm gonna remedy it, I said, crumpling the letter in my fist. I'm gonna remedy it right now. When someone challenges you to a duel, you don't show up with a water pistol. Unless, of course, the challenge is so stupid that a water pistol is all it deserves. I went back inside, set my coffee down, and went to the kitchen junk drawer, that vortex of dead batteries, soy sauce packets, and rubber bands. I found what I was looking for. A pair of bright orange, kid-safe scissors. The ones with the rounded tips that couldn't cut through a wet paper towel. I walked back outside, past Buster, who gave me a look that said, "This is beneath you," and right up to the azalea shrub. I located the exact leaf from the grainy photograph. It was a healthy-looking leaf. Green, vibrant, unaware of the trouble it had caused. I'm sorry, little guy, I whispered. But Barbara has sentenced you to death. Snip. I made a show of it. I didn't just trim the one leaf, I trimmed 3 whole leaves. I was feeling generous. It was a massacre. The entire remedy took about 5 seconds. I stepped back. The shadow on the numbers was, predictably, unchanged. If anything, I'd just made it angrier. Perfect. I went back inside, grabbed my phone, and walked out to the curb. I took a new photo from the exact same terrible angle. I zoomed in. It was still grainy. The numbers were still shadowed. But the evidence of my compliance was there. If you knew what to look for, you didn't. I fired up my email to management@crestwoodcommons.hoa from mikey.4227@gmail.com. Subject, violation number 849, house numbers. Dear HOA Board, thank you for your notice regarding Guideline 8.4. I have taken immediate action to remedy the situation. The offending shrubbery has been trimmed to restore full visibility to the house numbers. Please see attached photo for confirmation. Sincerely, Mikey, 427 Sycamore. I hit send and felt a wave of smug satisfaction wash over me. I had complied. I had done exactly what they implied I should do. I checked all the boxes. Your move, Barbara. I spent the next week in a state of suburban bliss. I mowed my lawn, to a regulation 3.5 inches, thank you very much. I drank my porch beers. I waved to Dave, who had, I noticed, sadly taken down his whimsical wind chimes. So, you hear anything back? Dave asked me over the fence 5 days later. Not a peep, I said, sipping my beer. I think I beat the system, Dave. I think I found the loophole. Petty compliance. I don't know, man, he said, nervously weeding a flower bed that was already weedless. With Barbara, no news is usually bad news. It's like The quiet before the storm. She's probably just busy building her case. Building her case? What case? The case of the barely trimmed bush? I'm fine. I was not fine. The following Saturday, the beige apocalypse continued. This time, the envelope was stiffer. It felt heavier. It wasn't just a letter. I tore it open. My $50 fine was enclosed. "What?" I yelled, causing a nearby squirrel to fall off the fence. "Dear resident, your remedy, dated October 29th, was reviewed by the Architectural Committee and found to be insufficient. The violation of Guideline 8.4 remains. The numbers are still not clearly visible from the street. The $50 to $100 fine is now due. Furthermore, a new violation has been observed. Violation. Guideline 12.2, Shrubbery Aesthetics. Per the CC&Rs, all landscaping modifications must adhere to a uniform and professional standard. Your recent erratic trimming of the azalea shrub does not meet this standard. Please have the shrub professionally pruned and submit a compliant solution for the house numbers within 7 days, or face an additional fine of $100. My eye twitched. Erratic? Erratic? I'll show you erratic. The $50 fine was an insult. The new violation was a declaration of war. They had insulted my leaf trimming skills. It was personal. "She wants visible," I grumbled, storming into the house. "She wants professional." I was pacing the living room, ranting to Buster, who had wisely hidden under the coffee table. "They want visible, buddy? We can do visible. How visible do you want it, Barbara? You want the International Space Station to be able to read my address? Is that what you want? You want pilots flying into the local airport to use my house as a navigational beacon?" I grabbed my keys. I was going to the hardware store. I bypassed the aisle with the tasteful HOA-approved numbers. I bypassed the brass, the chrome, and the elegant ceramic tiles. I marched straight to the mailbox and reflective aisle, the tacky aisle. I found them, 6-inch tall, peel and stick, reflective gold numbers. The kind of numbers you see on a 1980s speedboat named The Wet Dream. They were glorious. They were hideous. They were, without a doubt, the tackiest things in the entire store. I bought 3 of them, a 4, a 2, and a 7. I drove home, whistling. I didn't bother with a ruler. I didn't bother with a level. I walked right up to my garage door, the giant, beige, HOA-approved garage door, and I slapped them on. 4, 2, 7. They were crooked. They were bubbling. They were a solid foot apart, and when the sun hit them, they lit up like the gates of a very cheap version of heaven. "There," I said, stepping back to the curb to admire my handiwork. "Let's see her complain about these." They were visible. Oh Lord, were they visible. The tacky gold numbers on the garage gave me a solid 48 hours of pure, unadulterated joy. Every time I pulled into my driveway, I was greeted by their glorious, reflective sheen. It was like my house was winking at me. But, as fate would have it, I had other, non-HOA-related problems. Specifically, the paver on my front walkway that had been trying to break my ankle for 6 months. Every time I got a package, I'd trip on it. I'd finally decided to bite the bullet and get it fixed. I wasn't doing it for the HOA. I was doing it for my own dignity. And for the Amazon delivery guy, who I was pretty sure was getting ready to sue me. I called a local company, Carlos's Custom Concrete and Pavers. The next morning, a guy in a dusty pickup truck rolled up. This was Carlos. He was a big, no-nonsense guy with a tape measure on his belt and a look on his face that said he'd seen it all. "So, this is the one?" he asked, pointing at the rogue paver with his boot. "That's the one," I said, leaning against my doorframe. "It's got a personal vendetta against me." Carlos knelt, poked the paver, and sighed. "Yeah, the ground settled wrong. The whole section is uneven. To do it right, I gotta pull up this whole front walk, re-level the base with new sand and gravel, and relay 'em. It's a job." "Sounds expensive," I said. "Sounds right," he replied, not skipping a beat. He stood up, dusted off his jeans, and started taking measurements, scribbling on a clipboard. As he was measuring, he suddenly stopped and squinted. He looked at the numbers by my front door. Then, his gaze traveled to my garage. He lowered his clipboard. You moving?" he asked. "Nope," I said. "You just really like the number 427. I burst out laughing. "Long story, man. Let's just say my HOA president is on a visibility crusade, and I'm her new favorite project." Carlos let out a deep, booming laugh. It was the laugh of a man who understood. "Ah, an HOA. Say no more. I hate 'em. I get it now." He pointed at the tacky gold numbers. "That's the spite set, right? The malicious compliance edition?" "You get me, Carlos. You really do." "I did a job in a neighborhood over on Hillcrest last month," he said, shaking his head as he continued measuring. "Gated community, rich folks. This guy had to get a permit from his board to paint his birdhouse." "You're kidding me." "Nope. Swear to God. And it had to be one of 3 approved shades of taupe. He wanted to go with robin's egg blue. They almost fined him for proposed non-conformity. It's a racket, man. A racket is exactly what it—" I stopped. The blood in my veins turned to ice. Coming down the street, moving at a funereal pace of exactly 5 miles per hour, was the Barbara Mobile, a pristine, white, luxury SUV that probably idled at a higher cost per hour than my first job. It was her patrol vehicle. It cruised past my house, stopped, and then slowly reversed. The passenger side window glided down. Barbara was at the wheel. She was exactly as you'd picture. Short, helmet-like blonde hair, enormous sunglasses that hid any trace of a soul, a floral print blouse that looked both expensive and flammable. She was the physical embodiment of a negative Yelp review. She put the SUV in park, in the middle of the street. "Michael," she said. Her voice was smooth, like gravel wrapped in silk. "Barbara," I said. Carlos, the contractor, just froze, tape measure in hand, looking like a man who had just walked in on a very weird domestic dispute. Barbara's sunglasses slid down her nose. She wasn't looking at me. She was staring at my garage door. Her lip curled, just slightly. "I see you're redecorating," she said. "Just making them visible, Barbara," I said, leaning back, trying to look casual. "Per your request. They're reflective and everything. You know, for safety, in case a low-flying plane needs to land in my driveway." Her eyes slowly swiveled from the garage numbers, to Carlos, to the upended paver on my walkway. Her smile, which was a terrifying, tight-lipped thing, faded completely. "And I see you're having work done," she said. "Just fixing a crack, Barbara. Don't want the mailman to trip." "Michael," she said, drawing out the name, "you know as well as I do that all alterations to hardscaping require a formal review. I trust you submitted your Form 3B for hardscape alterations and site improvements?" I stared at her. "Form 3B? I'm fixing a single paver, Barbara, not building the Taj Mahal." "All alterations," she repeated, her voice turning to steel. "The committee must review the materials, the color of the replacement sand, and the proposed vendor's insurance. This is unapproved." Carlos, to his credit, spoke up. "Ma'am, I'm just re-leveling the existing stones. It'll look exactly the same, just flatter." Barbara didn't even look at him. She kept her gaze locked on me. "I'll expect the form on my desk by Monday. We'll review it at next month's meeting." "Next month? The guy is here now." "Then he'll have to come back." She pushed her sunglasses back up. "And Michael, a new letter will be forthcoming about those tacky stickers on your garage. That is a blatant violation of the Garage Door Addendum, Section 4A. They constitute a blight." The window glided up. The SUV shifted into drive and whispered away. For a full 30 seconds, nobody spoke. The only sound was a distant lawnmower. Carlos finally let out a low whistle. "Wow, she is a lot." "She called them tacky," I said, feeling a vain throb in my temple. "Well," Carlos started. "I know," I snapped. "They are tacky. That's the point. But she's not allowed to be right." Carlos packed up his clipboard. "Look, man, I'll write you the estimate, but I'm not coming back until you get that form signed. I can't afford to have my truck banned from the neighborhood. She'll do it too. I've seen it." "So I'm just supposed to live with this?" I kicked the loose paver. "Or," Carlos said, a small grin on his face, "you could just tell her you're not fixing it." I watched him get in his truck and drive away. I was left alone on my porch, defeated. I had 2 sets of house numbers, a broken walkway, and a new fine coming for blight. She had me. She had me cornered. The 3rd letter arrived 2 days later. It wasn't even in an envelope. It was a single, stiff, beige sheet, jammed directly into my mailbox's flag. It was a hand-delivered declaration of total war. The fines were all there, itemized like a receipt from hell. Violation 8.4. Numbers insufficient. $50. Violation 12.2. Shrubbery erratic. $100. Violation 4A. Garage door blight. $100. Total fines due $250. Hazard. "This is your final notice," the letter screamed in bold, underlined 16-point Times New Roman. "The fines must be paid within 48 hours. Furthermore, we require immediate and serious compliance with all listed guidelines. Failure to comply will result in our legal counsel taking further action and a lien being placed on your property." A lien. A lien. Over a leaf and some tacky numbers. I stormed inside, crumpled the letter, and threw it at the wall. Buster, who had been napping on the cool kitchen tile, yelped and ran for cover under the table. "I'm sorry, buddy," I said, my voice shaking. I was pacing. I was a caged animal. "But she's lost her mind. A lien? $250? For what? For this?" I grabbed the letter from the floor and uncrumpled it, my eyes fixing on 2 words. Serious compliance. "She wants serious?" I muttered, pacing from the kitchen to the living room and back. "She wants serious? I've given her compliant. I've given her maliciously compliant. What's left? What's serious?" I looked out the front window, past the crooked gold numbers, past the erratically trimmed bush. My gaze settled on my lawn. It was overgrown. I was supposed to mow it yesterday, but the whole contractor and Barbara incident had thrown me off my game. The grass was a solid 5 inches, way past the 3.5-inch HOA limit. I was already in violation of something else, I was sure. "Gotta mow the lawn," I mumbled. My eyes drifted to the corner of my garage, where my tools were leaning. My rake, my shovel, and it. My two-stroke, gas-powered, shoulder strap-equipped, commercial-grade weed whacker. My string trimmer, as the polite folks call it. I called it the Destroyer. It was an obnoxious, loud, smoke-belching monster of a machine, and I loved it. I looked at the overgrown lawn. I looked at the Destroyer. I looked back at the letter. Guideline 8.4, house numbers not sufficiently visible. My brain, which had been fogged with rage, suddenly became crystal clear. It was like a scene in a movie. The AC unit kicked on, providing a low hum. The dust motes danced in the afternoon light. I walked over to my bookshelf, to the thick, 3-ring binder that had been mockingly presented to me at my closing. Crestwood Commons, CC&Rs. I blew a layer of dust off it. I flipped past the sections on approved mailbox finishes and holiday decoration timetables. I found Section 8. Property identification. I read 8.4 again. All residents must maintain clearly visible address numbers from the street. I kept reading. I read the whole section. I read the addendums. My heart started to pound. "Buster," I whispered. Buster poked his head out from under the table. "Buster, it doesn't say where." I read it again. It specified font type, Arial, Times New Roman, or simple block, and size, minimum 4 inches. It specified they must be affixed and maintained. But it didn't say what they had to be affixed to. It didn't say affixed to the house. It didn't say affixed to the mailbox. It just said affixed and maintained and visible. "It's a loophole," I said, a slow, maniacal, glorious grin spreading across my face. "It's a glorious, grass-stained loophole." I looked back at my lawn. It was essentially a giant, green, 3,000 square foot canvas. "She wants visible?" I said to the empty room. "I'll give her visible. She wants serious? I'll give her serious. She wants 4-inch minimum." I chuckled. "I'll give her 15-foot minimum." I closed the binder. The decision was made. I went to the garage. I grabbed the red 2-gallon gas can and lovingly topped off the Destroyer. I pulled a fresh spool of the thickest, gnarliest plastic line from the shelf. I went back inside and grabbed a can of White Home, marking spray paint from my utility closet, the kind contractors use to mark a gas line. I walked out to my front yard. I stood at the curb. I took a deep breath, smelling the freshly cut grass from Dave's yard. He had no idea what was about to happen. I started to spray. I didn't spray a 4. I sprayed a 4 that was the size of my car. I laid out a 2 that stretched from the walkway to the oak tree. I finished with a 7 that practically touched the sidewalk. They were perfect. Simple block, white outlines. My canvas was prepped. I put on my safety goggles. I strapped the Destroyer over my shoulder. I primed the engine. "This one's for you, Barbara," I said. I yanked the cord. The engine screamed to life. "Brap! Brap! Brap!" A cloud of blue 2-stroke smoke plumed into the air. The sound was deafening, glorious, and I was certain a violation of at least 3 noise ordinances. I didn't care. I was an artist, and this was my chisel. I stood over the first line of the giant 4. I squeezed the throttle. The plastic line whirred, becoming an invisible disk of pure destruction. I sank it into the sod. The effect was instantaneous and deeply, profoundly satisfying. A geyser of grass, dirt, roots, and thatch exploded from the ground. It wasn't just trimming the grass. It was excavating. I was scalping my lawn, digging a trench of raw, brown earth right along the white paint line. Dirt and grass clippings peppered my shins and face. The smell of gasoline mixed with the earthy, sharp scent of torn roots. I was laughing. I'm not sure when I started, but I was cackling like a maniac over the wire of the engine. This was therapy. This was better than yoga. This was suburban rage primal scream, and I was its loudest practitioner. I finished the 4. It was a masterpiece of destruction. A 15-foot-tall, 4-inch-wide trench of beautiful, dark soil. I moved on to the 2. I was getting good at this. I carved the curve like Michelangelo, if Michelangelo had been fueled by spite and a 2-stroke engine. Clods of dirt flew into the street. A rock shot out and pinged off the light post. "Mikey!" I heard a voice cut through the engine's roar. I eased off the throttle, and the BRAP died down to a low, angry put-put-put. I turned. Dave was standing on the edge of his pristine, golf course-perfect lawn. His jaw was on the ground. He was holding a rake. "Mikey!" he yelled again, taking a few hesitant steps onto my driveway. "What are you doing? Are you okay?" I lifted my safety goggles onto my forehead. I was covered in grime, sweat, and bits of leaf. I must have looked like a soldier emerging from a foxhole. "Just fixing the number problem, Dave," I shouted over the idling engine. "Gotta be compliant." Dave stared at the giant 4 and the half-finished 2. His eyes were wide with a mixture of terror and, was that awe? "Mikey, I think you finally snapped," he said, his voice hushed. "I think this is it. This is performance art." "It's malicious compliance, Dave," I roared, pulling my goggles back down. "And it's beautiful!" I revved the engine again. Brap! Dave literally jumped back onto his own property, holding his rake up like a shield. I went back to work. The 2 was finished. I moved to the 7. This was the home stretch. I was in the zone. The world had faded away. There was no Barbara. There were no fines. There was only the line, the engine, and the glorious, cathartic thwack, thwack, thwack as the line bit into the earth. I carved the top bar of the 7. I carved the long diagonal slash. I was getting meticulous now, squaring the corners, making sure the font was a perfect, simple block. 20 minutes later, it was done. I hit the kill switch. The sudden, absolute silence was deafening. It rang in my ears. The only sound was the tink, tink, tink of the cooling engine. I was breathing heavily. My arms felt like jelly from the vibration. I unstrapped the destroyer and let it fall to the remaining grass. I walked, slowly, backwards into the street. I needed to see it from the proper angle. I needed to see it from Barbara's angle. I stood in the middle of the road. It was breathtaking. In the center of my otherwise normal, green suburban lawn, there were 3 of the largest, sharpest, brownest numbers I had ever seen. 4-2-7. Each one was 15 feet tall. The trenches I'd dug were deep and dark. It was, without question, the ugliest and most beautiful thing I had ever created. It was an act of landscape vandalism and typographical genius. It was, above all, visible. You couldn't miss it. A blind person could find my house by following the smell of turned earth. A car slowed down as it passed. a woman in a minivan. She stared, her mouth open, and almost drove onto Dave's curb. Dave, for his part, was just standing there, motionless, shaking his head. I walked back to my porch, tracking mud and grass clumps all the way. I was still covered in grime. I didn't care. I went inside, grabbed a beer from the fridge, and came back out. I sat down in my porch chair, cracked the beer, and took a long, slow sip. It was the best beer I'd ever had. Buster came out and sat at my feet, looked at the lawn, looked at me, and let out a little woof. "I know, buddy," I said, scratching his head. "It's a lot to take in." I looked at my watch. 4:55 p.m. Barbara, I knew, made her evening patrol at 5 o'clock p.m. On the dot. I took another sip, and I waited. The Barbara Mobile was punctual, I'll give her that. At 5:03 p.m., the pearl-white SUV rounded the corner. I heard it before I saw it, that smug, electric hybrid whine. It cruised down Sycamore. I just sat there. I took a sip of beer. I didn't wave. The SUV got level with my house. Scream! The brakes slammed so hard the vehicle rocked forward on its suspension. It was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. The SUV sat there for a long moment, idling. I could just see her silhouette through the tinted glass. I imagined the gears turning in her head, trying to process the data her eyes were sending. The driver's door flew open. Barbara got out. She left the door open. She left the car in the middle of the street. Her phone was already in her hand. She stood there, frozen, staring at my lawn. Her mouth was opening and closing, but no sound was coming out. She looked like a goldfish trying to understand trigonometry. "What?" The shriek was so high-pitched it probably shattered windows a block away. "What have you done?" I leaned forward in my chair, resting my elbows on my knees. I gave her my most polite, neighborly smile. "Good afternoon, Barbara," I said, my voice projecting clearly in the sudden silence. "Just complying with Guideline 8.4, had a bit of free time this afternoon." She took a few steps onto my driveway, her expensive sandals crunching on the dirt clods I'd thrown. This is vandalism," she shrieked, pointing at the four with a trembling finger. You've destroyed your lawn. This is a violation of everything." "Is it?" I asked, genuinely curious. I took another sip. "Which guideline exactly? I just read the book. I didn't see a rule against earth tone numbering. It's very rustic, don't you think? And I checked. It's simple block font. Totally compliant." You maniac," she sputtered. She was shaking. This was new. I'd only ever seen her icy calm. This apoplectic rage was a much better look on her. Are they visible enough for you, Barbara?" I asked. "Because I can go bigger. I'm pretty sure I can fit the zip code on the side yard if you need me to." That's when she did it. The ultimate Karen move. She held her phone up to her face. "I am calling the police," she screamed. "You are a lunatic. You are a public disturbance." She was actually dialing 911. On me. For landscaping. This was a new high score. I just sat and waited. I finished my beer. 10 minutes later, a cruiser pulled up. It didn't use its sirens. It just arrived. 2 officers got out. One was older, with a mustache and a belly that said he was 3 weeks from retirement. I'll call him Officer Miller. The other was young, sharp, and looked like he'd rather be doing literally anything else. Officer Krupke. They walked up, stopping to look at the massive 427 carved into my yard. Officer Miller looked at the lawn. He looked at me, sitting calmly on my porch, covered in dirt. He looked at Barbara, who was practically vibrating. "Folks," Officer Miller said, his voice a gravelly monotone. "What's the, problem here?" "Officer!" Barbara snapped, marching up to him. "Thank God you're here. This maniac has destroyed his property. He's causing a public disturbance. He's insane. Look at this." She waved her arm at my lawn like she was presenting a crime scene. Both cops looked at the lawn numbers. They looked back at Barbara. Officer Krupke, the young one, turned his back to Barbara and coughed heavily into his shoulder. He wasn't coughing. He was laughing. I saw his shoulders shaking. Officer Miller just sighed. It was the sigh of a man who had seen too much suburban stupidity. "Ma'am," he said, turning to Barbara, "is this his house?" "Yes," she said. "And it's an eyesore. It's bringing down property values. It's a blight. You have to arrest him. For vandalism." Officer Miller rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Ma'am, I can't arrest a man for, what, mowing his lawn badly?" "He didn't mow it," she shrieked. "He dug trenches in it." "Ma'am, it's his lawn. It's his property. As long as it's not, an offensive symbol or something, he can landscape it however he wants. It's not a criminal matter." I decided it was time to speak. I stood up, slowly. "Evening, officers," I said, giving a polite nod. "Just trying to be a good citizen. My HOA," I gestured to Barbara, who hissed, "was very concerned that my address wasn't visible, sent me multiple fines." I held up the crumpled beige letter. Said I needed serious compliance. They were worried about first responders, I guess. For emergencies. So I just wanted to make sure that if, God forbid, there was a fire, the fire department wouldn't get lost. Safety first, right? Officer Krupke had to turn and walk back to the cruiser. He was laughing so hard. Officer Miller looked at me. His mustache twitched. He knew exactly what I was doing. "Safety first," he agreed, his voice deadpan. "Well, ma'am," he said to Barbara, "it's definitely visible. I'd say he solved the problem." "This is not... You can't... This is a civil matter," Barbara finally sputtered, realizing she'd lost. "That's right, ma'am," Officer Miller said, putting his notepad away. "It is a civil matter. Between you and him. And the HOA. Has nothing to do with us." He tapped his hat. "Have a good night, sir. Try to keep the dirt out of the street." "Will do, officer." The cops got back in their car and drove away. Barbara and I were left alone. She was standing in my driveway. I was standing on my porch. The silence was heavier than my weed whacker. She stared at me. It was not a look of anger. It was a look of pure, unadulterated, weapons-grade hatred. It was a look that could curdle milk, kill crops, and reverse puberty. She said nothing. She just stared. Then, she got in her white SUV, backed up, almost hitting Dave's mailbox, and sped off. I sat back down. I felt a cool breeze. It was perfect. The HOA, as it turned out, was completely paralyzed. I had, in my glorious two-stroke fueled rage, found the one blind spot in their 400-page book of rules. They had no guideline for this. They couldn't find me for the lawn. It wasn't dead, just altered. They couldn't find me for the numbers. They were aggressively compliant with Section 8.4. They were the correct font, well over the minimum size, and undeniably visible. They were stuck. Of course, that didn't stop them from trying. A week later, I got a new letter. This one was about the excessive soil displacement and non-uniform grass height. I ignored it. They sent another one about the tacky gold numbers on the garage, which I'd forgotten all about. So I did what any good neighbor would do. I went back to the hardware store. I didn't buy new numbers. I bought 3 5-pound bags of the cheapest, brightest, most obnoxious yellow marigold seeds they had. I spent the next Saturday filling my 15-foot-tall dirt trenches with seeds and water. A few weeks later, my lawn was even more of a spectacle. I now had a 15-foot-tall, bright yellow, flowering 427 in my yard. It was hideous. It was magnificent. The bees loved it. I became a neighborhood legend. Dave started calling me Lawn Gilo. The Amazon delivery guy told me my house was the only one he could see from space, and always gave me my packages first. A few teenagers started taking selfies in front of it. The HOA, I heard through Dave, tried to pass an emergency amendment to the landscaping rules, but it required a 60% vote from the homeowners. It failed. Spectacularly. Apparently, nobody likes Barbara. I'm sitting on my porch right now, drinking a beer. The marigolds are in full bloom. It's aggressively cheerful. Barbara? She takes the long way around the block now. Won't even drive down my street. The white Barbara Mobile is a ghost. And the fines? They just stopped. The letters stopped. The beige envelopes ceased their migration to my mailbox. They say you can't fight the HOA. They say you can't win against the beige. Turns out you can. You just have to be willing to get your hands dirty, and your lawn very, very dirty.